Good morning and welcome to our webinar on Dynamics GP tips and tricks. My name is Jenny Tomlinson and I am the Marketing Manager here at m-hance, and I will be acting as the moderator for today's presentation. I'm joined by my colleague Sharon Keegan, who is m-hance's Dynamics Consultant. Before I hand over to Sharon, I would like to review a few simple housekeeping items. We expect the webinar to last approximately 60 minutes. Please note the webinar is being recorded and will be available to view on demand. All participants are set to listen-only mode and will remain so for the duration of the webinar. If you have a question, click the question button on the right-hand side of your screen. In the new pane that opens, type your question in the top box and click Ask. Do feel free to submit your questions at any point during the webinar. Due to time constraints, we will answer them offline afterwards. With that, I'd like to hand you over to our presenter. Sharon, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Just a quick introduction on what we will be doing today in the webinar. So it's a 1-hour webinar. We hopefully will get everything covered in that time. We'll be doing a live product demo of some of the GP features that are not they're not commonly used, though they are available, that you haven't to buy additional licensing or anything like that. Most of the things that you're going to see are applicable to all versions of GP, like right back to version 4, which some of you are probably too young to remember. Some are for the newer versions, but the newest version will be GP 2016 or 2, so we won't be going right up to the newest ones. We will note which features and when they were introduced, if they are newer ones, as we go along. And as we've already said, if you want more information, please do ask questions in the chat box and we'll go over these after the webinar and get back to you with an answer. Again, this is because we don't want to take up too much time. We've quite a large number of people attending today. So with that, just I suppose a brief note about me. I am a GP consultant and I've been working with GP for the last 21 years. Prior to that, in the deep dark depths of the 1990s, I trained as an accountant. So that's just my background. Some of you already know me, and for those that don't, hi. So our agenda. So I'm just going to go through some of the system things. So GP macros, you've probably all heard of them, you may have seen them. I'm going to show you a very simple macro and then explain what the other types of macros, what we do with them. Audit trail codes and how they're used in the system. Sending messages to users, logged in users. This is useful for when you want everybody to log out at a particular time because you're going to do maintenance and so on. And then just a little bit on navigation and a couple of different ways of viewing data and how to perform common tasks. So questions we might often see on the support desk, like, I have a supplier sent me a check. How do I process a check from a supplier? Because obviously we send checks to suppliers, we don't get checks from suppliers. So what do we do with that? What is a national account? Can I do write-offs without having to go into each and every account to do a single transaction? And if we have time, then we'll have a look at deferring income and expenditure. That applies for like service contracts and that sort of thing, where you want to recognize it over a period rather than all in one month. So with that, we will go to the product demonstration. And sorry, let's come out of here. And this is GP 2018, but as I said, we are not going to be I'm going to show you new features or anything like that. It's not a new features 2018 demo here today. So the first thing we're going to look at is GP macros. So what is a macro? So if any of you, I'm sure you all use Excel and maybe you use macros in Excel. A macro is just a way of recording actions. So and it's quite a dumb tool, but it's a useful tool. And when I say dumb, is it just repeats what you show. So if you tell it, I want to go to this line, this line, this line, that's exactly what it will do. It's not intuitive at all. It just does what you told it to do, which would be nice if everything in life was like that. So I'm just going to show you a little macro that we sometimes use for sites where they're very, very date sensitive on their processing. So when they log in the morning, they want all users to confirm the date they're processing. So to record the macro, I'm just going to go up here to Tools, Macro, Record, and it'll ask me where I want to save the macro. So I'm going to stick it on the desktop and I'm going to call it Change Date and save that. So now it's recording, so it's going to repeat anything that I do now. And literally all I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this date button here, and that prompts the user to use the date. So I'm finished, my macro is now finished. So Tools, Macro, Stop Record. So what good does that do me? Well, it doesn't do me a whole heap of good at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into the startup. So I'm going to add in my shortcuts my macro, and let's just call it date. Where is my macro file? So you do need to remember where you put that, and add it. Now, because this is in startup, what it means is as soon as I log in, it's going to prompt me for a date. So let's just change company. If I can get into one of the other companies and see what happens. So straight away, the date box pops up. So again, like I said, that's useful for people who are very conscious of their dates. So if you're going to be processing a new month and you don't want to process into the new month, you're in a new month, you don't want to process into that, you want to keep processing into the previous month, you can set it so that users can have this. And what you can do is you can record it, save it to a central location, then add it to each person's startup. So that's one use of macros to kind of make things faster. We do use more advanced macros for things like bringing in data. So say if you have started using m-hance EFT and you wanted to bring in bank details, and there's no clear import program in the system for that. So what we would do is we would write a macro where we would record us entering the one creditor's EFT details, and then from there we would copy that into a mail merge document and link it to a spreadsheet with the other people's details, run the mail merge. It would create a repeating macro that we would then run, and off it would go. I can give you more information on things like that if you want to, just in the chat box. If you just want to ask a question about that later and you want more information, then please do make a note there and we will get back to you after the webinar. So that's just a little bit about macros. The next thing we're going to look at are audit trail codes. So audit trail codes are a way of tracking your data through the system. So you will know that when you post a batch in one of the sub-ledgers, so purchase ledger, sales ledger, inventory, it goes to the general ledger, but it doesn't keep the original batch ID. So instead, it's when you post it, it is given an audit trail code, and that goes to the general ledger. And it's kind of like it ties it back. It's exactly what it says. It's an audit trail code. So it stays with the transaction throughout its life in the system. So the setup on the audit trail codes is on the administration tab and under setup and posting. So if we look at audit trail codes in here, and in my version, these may be slightly different in yours because you can adjust them. So if a batch begins with CMADJ, it's a bank reconciliation transaction. If I go on down through here, if it begins with sorry, that's just the financial ones, the sales ones. So if it begins with RMAPY, it was an apply from receivables and so on. So when you see these prefixes in the general ledger, you know what the transaction was it came from. Another very, very good use for this is if when you look in your general ledger, so if I pick an account that hopefully has transactions in it, bank account is usually good. So if I look back at some of these, okay, so this was a general ledger journal because I can tell the audit trail code is GLTRN. So there's not a whole heap of information there for me. Let's go back and see, was there anything in the prior years? Display. No, okay, there isn't. So, but what you can do is you can take that audit trail code and you can find it in your purchase ledger or sales ledger. This is very useful if you're doing a reconciliation of, say, your creditors ledger to your general ledger, and you've got a difference, but you're not sure what it is. And things you will check are things like voids, for instance, and you can reprint posting journals in the system. So if I go to the purchase ledger, for instance, and look at the reports and posting journals, and a transaction journal. So let's just go new. I'm just going to give it a name. If I know the audit trail code, so I can see it in the general ledger and I want to see where this transaction came from, I can type that in, but you may not. So you could go and look at the batch ID that you know your batch ID did that post to the general ledger. So you will have all your batch IDs down here, and each one has an audit trail code that you will then see in the general ledger. So that's a way to find it. And you can use smart lists. You can get really advanced with it. You can use smart lists that are sorted by the audit trail code to see if you can match up your general ledger and your purchase ledger and so on. So that's an audit trail code. It's just a link in the system. So if you're looking at a GL account, you see something with a prefix and you're not sure what it is, you just go to your administration tab and you go to your setup pane and have a look in the audit trail codes, and it should be able to tell you what it is. Okay, so that's just our audit trail codes. The next thing I've down to look at is sending messages to all logged in users. Now this was a new feature in GP 2013 R2. R2 means second release. So this is, again, it might not be something you ever use. It might be something that you think would be very useful if you're GP 2013 or later. And it's on your administration pane, and it's under your utilities and system, and send users message. So these are the users that are set up on my system here. They're not logged into any companies at the moment, but I've ticked to send a message to all users, and I can, send it as a notification message, and I can type my message in here. So it might be something like, please remember to log off at 5 p.m. We're doing system maintenance this evening. Something like that. It's quite straightforward, and that's so it's not to be used for pranks, just so you know. That's all it does. You can send messages to logged in users. It is useful. It saves you having to send around an email or going around to people's desks or phoning around to different offices. So yeah, that's a good one. The next thing then on system kind of settings, there's a new feature that came in. Again, this one came in GP 2013 R2, which it is quite old at this stage, I suppose. So most of you are probably on that or later, so you will have this. Within the sales ledger and the purchase ledger, you can now use a tool for combining and modifying supplier and customer accounts. So why would you use that? Well, m-hance actually are a great example of this. So we'll say that you have set up at some point in the past, maybe you've been dealing with this for 20 years. The company I originally started for was called Notley Cahill, and then we became Sequel Financial, and then we were bought by Mentech, who were bought by Calix, and so on and so on. So let's say you were dealing with this when we were Sequel Financial. You may have created an account SEQ001 as your creditor account. But now we're m-hance, so you might want to change that to MHA001. And up to now, you've not been able to change the creditor ID or debtor ID. It's just locked in. You can change the name, but not the ID. And what does happen is when you have suppliers or customers changing their names, you will find that you will have a new staff. Just ignore that. That's the beauty of live demos. You will find that you might get a new staff member, and they get an invoice in from m-hance, and they go, can't find any m-hance there in the system. They don't know it's SEQ001. So they create a new account called m-hance. So now you have transactions on two accounts, and you've got to transfer between them and so on. It gets a bit messy. So with the combiner and modifier, I'm just going to go down here to have a look at it. So it's under utilities in purchasing, and there's one under utilities in sales as well for your customers. Same kind of thing applies. So if I look in the vendor combiner modifier, and just one quick word on this, you do need to be logged in as the SA user, or if you have a user with SA privileges, that will be a user who's able to set up new accounts, new users in GP, new user accounts in GP. Typically that is the SA user, possibly the Dyn SA user. You do need to be logged in as that user for this functionality. You can open it as other users, but it can go wrong. So just remember SA user only. So the combiner will combine two accounts together. So in the example I gave you, we would have Sequel Financial and m-hance. So we're going to combine them into those two accounts into one, which means we don't have to go and do debit in one and credit in the other. It just means everything is combined into one account. The combiner, it goes through the system, it finds every record, and it changes it, basically. So that would combine two accounts, the vendor combiner. The vendor modifier just allows you to change a vendor ID now. Import file means you can do a whole file of these if you want to do a complete tidy up, but we're just going to do one for the moment. So the source vendor ID is, here's my source vendor. So I'm going to change ACE Travel Company. And I'm going to create a new account. I'm going to change their account to ACETRAVE, let's just say 01. And I'm going to hit process. So it says you must make a backup of your company. So you should do that. I have backup already, so I'm going to carry on and continue. And once it's done, it doesn't take very long normally. It will pop up here and tell me if it's worked or not. So source, vendor, destination, and it's done. So now if I go back and look at my creditor cards and that, there is no Ace Travel 00001. It's 01. So that changes it. It changes all the history. I can look at an inquiry for Ace Travel, and you will see it's Ace Travel 01. All of the invoices, all of the payments are now belonging to Ace Travel 01. So that's how the vendor combiner modifier works. If I go and show you the sales window, it's exactly the same. And it's under here. So it's the exact same, it's just got a different name. It does the exact same thing. So again, if you need any more information on anything like that, please do leave a question in the chat box. So that's kind of the system information and settings thing. So we're a quarter of the way through, which is good because it's just after 10:15. So I hope I'm not talking too fast for everybody. So faster ways to get around in the system now. So if I go back to my home page, so I hope you know already that you can add shortcuts here on your shortcuts pane. And you can do that by right-clicking and go add window, if you know the name of the window and what dictionary it lives in. But there are easier ways to do that. So we'll say you have a window that you use every day, for instance, sales transaction entry. So sales transaction entry, instead of my having to right-click and add here, what I can do here is I can go File, Add Shortcuts. And I can rename it if I wish under shortcut properties, but I'm not going to do that. So when I click that, it's in there. So that's the fast add for shortcuts. Okay. Other little buttons around here. Sorry, excuse me for a moment. Just going to take a drink of water. So you may all have preferred that. Okay, sorry. I'll repeat what I was saying there. So there's just more ways of navigating. Okay. So just fast ones. How to change company. You will click in here and you can pick a different company from the drop down. You don't have to go up to the menu, the GP menu, to do all these things. You can change your user here, and you can change your date. And the date can be changed. There's so many ways to change the date. You can use these buttons. You can use the calendar button. You can type directly in. You can use the plus and minus buttons on your keyboard. So yeah, that's the ways to change the date. And something that was new in GP 2010 is the right-click menu. So if I go into a transaction, let's just find one, and I want to remove a line, instead of having to go up to any pane up here or over here, I can just right-click and insert or delete row, cut, copy, paste. So this is just making everything in line with Windows and how Windows works. So again, that's the right-click menu. That came in GP 2010. So again, I don't think there's anybody on an older version than that. But and it's not a huge thing, but again, it's useful and it might make things easier for getting around. Okay, so we're going to look at inquiries now, and just something now. This again is something that's new. It's a thing called an all-in-one inquiry. It is used for people who are using sales order processing and purchase order processing. This is for you. So if I look at the purchasing one first, and obviously it's under inquiries, all-in-one view. Now, what does the all-in-one view do? Well, it does what it says. It gives you an all-in-one view. So if I have a look at Ace Travel, it shows me POs, receipts, invoices, payments, returns. So it gives you all of the information about that creditor, and you have next 5, previous 5 where applicable. This came in GP 2015 or 2 for purchase order processing, and it came in GP 2016 for sales order processing, which I think there was a huge outcry probably when it came out for POP and not for SOP, because sales order processing, you want to see your customers is probably something you're more interested in an all-in-one view than your creditors. And if we pick Aaron Fitz, and you have the same kind of drill backs as you do everywhere else in GP, so you can go back and look at where everything is. That's a really good one, the all-in-one inquiry. I think it's easier than looking at the straightforward, debtor inquiry or creditor inquiry. Everything's just listed in a line and there's a lot of numbers about it. This gives you all the information. You have your document number as well as your voucher number. You have dates and so on. So that's one that like I said, it came in 2015 or 2 for purchase order processing. It came in GP 2016 for sales order processing. Next one I'm going to show you, and this is one that's been around since year dot, but not many people use it. So I've been out in a number of sites and I've been asked, they might use Management Reporter or Jet Reports or various other reporting tools to get information from the accounts. So they're doing management accounts, financial accounts. But they may have something like someone comes in and says, what was our spend on, electricity over all companies or over all departments? And you go, okay, I'm going to have to run a Management report to get that information, or an FRX report. You don't actually have to do that. Within the inquiry, there's a thing called account rollup. And the account rollup basically allows you, once it opens, okay, that's again, beauty of live demos. There we go. So within the account rollup window, you can create your own inquiries to group accounts together. So I have one that I set up yesterday in preparation for this, and I'm going to just call it Sharon, which isn't very self-explanatory. Sorry guys, a bit of a cough. When I tab off that, do I want to add it? Yes. So this is my account rollup inquiry window on here. So it's saying, well, what do you want to view in this inquiry window? So I might want to view this year's figures. And so the type is actuals. And let's add a second column for last year's figures. I can also add a third column maybe with this year's budget. And if you notice, when I select budget, I now get a lookup window to allow me to pick a budget. So I'm going to pick my budget. So the next thing is, what accounts do I want to include in this roll-up? So what accounts am I inquiring on? So the range of accounts that I had were, this account is 6190. And I think it's a training account. And you have to insert the range. It's not enough just to type it in here. You must insert the range. Once I've done that, I can save it, close this, and redisplay. So it brings in, it's like the GL inquiry window, the summary inquiry window for one account. But in this case, if I drill back on it, it's giving me information for several accounts grouped together. So account code, the main account segment is 6190, and these are my departments. So it's just showing me what was my utilities expense across all departments. And because I've got this year, I've got last year, and I've got my budget. But as well as that, we can do calculations based on this. So, have we got a variance? So if I click in here to modify, I can add in a fourth column. You are restricted to 4 columns. And so variance. When I select variance and I put in here that it's a calculation, this arrow becomes available to me for me to do my calculation. So let's say I want to do last year. I'm going to add last year and subtract this year. That may be the other way around, but for the purpose of the demo, it will do. And I hit redisplay here. So now see there's a variance, $6, which isn't too bad, is it? You can also look at these as period balances. So again, it's the same as the GL summary window in your GL inquiries. And it allows us to see, a group of accounts together. You can do further calculations. You're not limited. You could do percentage variance and so on. So you've got various options in there to do different things with the account roll-ups. And again, if you want more information on this, please do put a note there in the chat window, and I can give you some more information on it, the kind of things you can do on it. While I'm in this window, actually, I just want to tell you about something that I haven't included in the agenda. But again, it's something that I go out on site and users don't know it's there. It's the help menu. the help menu in GP is really, really very good. Every window in GP, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of windows in GP, has its own menu, has its own help window. So if I hit the F1 key in any particular window, it brings up a help about this window. Now, there's not a huge information in my account Rollup inquiry window, but as well as giving me an overview, it gives me a list of the fields and what they're for and the buttons. Within the overview also, it will tell you, well, here's the kind of things we do in this window. So we view an account Rollup inquiry. It will give me a link that I can go create an account Rollup inquiry, and it'll give you a step-by-step through. Every window in GP has this. So for instance, if I open, I don't know, financial account, and I hit the F1 key, this is my account maintenance window. This is the kind of things I do in my account maintenance window. These are the fields. These are the buttons, and they're all listed in alphabetical order, so it's really nice, except for the fixed assets module, and I can't tell you the logic behind that. So use the help menu if you're ever stuck. This is something that, I mean, I'm working with GP for 21 years, and sometimes there are things that we don't do very often. Fixed assets actually would be a good one, because once it's set up, it's just set up. So if someone has a query on it, I'll probably go back and just, before I'm speaking to them, just have a quick look through the window to refresh in my mind what it's for. So use the help menu. It's really, really very good. It's one of the best things in GP, to be honest. It's really, really very good. So the next thing I want to show you is Smartlist Designer. So I'm sure you're all familiar with Smartlist. Smartlist has been around for a good while. It used to be called Explorer before Microsoft bought Dynamics GP, and they promptly changed it because it's not Windows Explorer. It's Data Explorer for GP. So like I said, you're all probably using Smartlist. I hope you're all using Smartlist. Smartlist is a really good tool. It's one that puts kind of power to do ad hoc inquiries in your hands. This is something that prior to the existence of this, you would have to pay a consultant to come out to give you something that was a one-off requirement, which really was, well, it wasn't a waste of money, I'd say, because I'm a consultant, but it was sort of excessive. So this allows you to do basically what are SQL queries without having to go into SQL or know anything about SQL. So Smartlist Designer extends that. So if I click in here, so let's call up an account transactions. Smartlist. So I can go in here and click new, and I can create a new smart list based on that one. Or I can just go back up here, come out altogether, and just go new and create my one from scratch. So would say, well, okay, I'm creating a smart list from scratch. I don't even know what where to look. What you're going to tell me that I can use all these tables from GP, but I don't know what tables I need. What tables do I need to add when I'm in this window? So what I would say to you, the easiest way to find out what the windows are, because I'm not going to go into a full training course on Smartlist Designer because we will be here all day, but to find out where the data is that you want. So say, for instance, you're going to say, well, first of all, why do I need Smartlist Designer? Smartlist Designer allows you to create links between different modules. So say, for instance, you have information in your inventory module about inventory items that you want to pull onto a sales smart list, but they're not in the sales table, so you can't see them in the default smart list. So using Smartlist Designer, you can create a link between the two and pull in that extra information. But first of all, how do I find out what table I want? Because if you look down here, here's all the sales tables. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tables. So knowing which ones you want is important. So the way that I use it still is I'll have a look at the window I want. So let's say, for instance, the information is in the account maintenance window in financials. So what I will do is I will go to Tools, Resource Descriptions, and Windows. I will find that window, and there it is, account maintenance. And if I have a look at the information on that window, so the default account, the default table that's linked to this account window is the GL account master. So then I need to go off and I can use the GL account master. I can find the tables in the GL account master using my Smartlist Designer. So if I go back, actually you can see a number of different names there for it. So when I go back into my Smartlist Designer and new, and it was GP, it was tables, it was financial. And I'm looking for GL account master or account master. That's going to be the name of it, because there's a display name as well as a technical name. So and there's account master, and that has all of the fields from the window that we looked at, the account maintenance window. And so that's how you start to build up your Smartlist Designer smart lists. This is one that kind of you probably will want more information on, so please do put a comment in the chat box, because like I said, I'm not going to do a full training course on it. This is not what it's for. It's just a quick demo of what's in the system. So if you do want more information on that and you do want to see more about it, let us know and we'll get back onto you with that. So I'm getting through these quite quickly, so I hope everyone understands my accent. So I'm just going to have a look at some of the common tasks that people might do. So like I said, the one we get a lot on support is the supplier sent me a check. How do I process a supplier check? You know, there is, if I have a look at the transactions menu for purchasing, there is no, you know, the only checks are the ones that I'm sending. They're not ones that I'm getting in. So how I do that is in the transaction entry window. When I enter the transaction, I'm going to enter a return. So it's like I'm treating this as a credit note that I've got. Okay, now it's not a credit note because it's money, but bear with me. So I'm going to put in this credit note, and let's go with is travel again. And I'm going to put my initials there. And let's say they're giving us a check for $120. Over here, I'm going to record that I got money from them. Okay. By doing that, it says, well, what checkbook am I putting this money into? It's a cash document. Here's the date and here's the payment number. And that's all good. I'm fine with that. And when I go now and look at my distributions, instead of debit creditors and credit the expense, it's now debiting the cash operating account and crediting the expense. So, and that's the distribution that you want. And it basically means that I've got a credit note, but I've also got a payment for it. So it will have a zero effect on the account. It has a zero effect on my creditors control account, zero effect on my creditors account, but it puts the money into my bank. Okay, so that's how to process a supplier check. And then you just post it as normal. I'm not going to, oh, sorry, it has locked again. It comes back pretty quickly, so not too bad. So that's entering a supplier check. And like I said, put a question in the chat box if you want more information, or maybe we can do some notes or something like that. The next thing I want to talk about are national accounts. So what are national accounts? National accounts are parent and child accounts. And I've seen this recently actually on a customer site where they have a head office that had 10 subsidiary offices, and they had the 10 subsidiary offices set up as individual debtors, which is correct. But what happened was the head office sent them a payment that took a credit note from one and applied it to an invoice on another, which meant that they were actually doing debit notes and credit notes between accounts to transfer balances and so on. It got quite messy. They didn't realize that we have a thing in GP called national accounts. And what national accounts do, let's just get the cards menu up here. You set up parent-child relationships, basically. So you pick a parent debtor. Who's the parent debtor? We'll use Aaron Fitz. And we can associate child accounts with that parent. Okay, so I'll save that. If I now go and look at those individual debtors, sorry, I should really be using the menu in here. You can tell how long someone's been using JP by whether or not they use up here or down here. So I'm going to try to use down here. So if I now go and look at my debtor accounts for those three debtors, you can see this is the parent debtor ID, and it's telling me that debtor ID Adam Park Resort is linked to Aaron Fitz. So what that means is I can now put on payments from Aaron Fitz that I can apply to invoices on the child accounts. So that saves a lot of work, you know, that saves a lot of work for people. And it's again, it's one of those things that not everybody knows is there. So, and they could be using it. It's very straightforward to set up. Don't forget your F1 key to open the help menu if you are stuck with it. But again, leave us a note there in the chat window and we'll send you more information. The next thing I'm going to look at is also for your debtors. They don't have it in the creditors module, but in the debtors module here, you can do bulk write-offs. So that would be a case where maybe you have lots of 1 and 2 and 3 and maybe 10 cent hanging around, either overpayments or underpayments on your customer accounts that you just want to get rid of. And instead of having to, create a list, use a smart list, put it into Excel and get somebody in the office to sit down and start keying in, debits and credits to write them off, you can actually, within the sales routines, where's routines? There we are. You can do write-off documents. So again, the write-off type is underpayments. So underpayments means that it's a debit balance on the account, and I can put in a limit. So I can say, well, any debit balance up to, I don't know, 99 cent maybe, or pence or dollars, whatever it is. You can put it in here. You put in a cutoff date. So I don't want to look at transactions after this date because they may be current ones. So you might decide to do this every 6 months to do a clear down or whatever. And you can pick a range of debtors or a class of debtors and so on. And down here, you'll see a reference to our national accounts as well. You can preview what you're going to write off. So there's probably not a whole heap in here. So let's just say $1 and we'll do it for everybody in preview. Okay, so there's only the one. So it is going to create a credit note for 10 cent and it will apply it to that underpayment and clear the account. So the same goes if we have overpayments. Again, you just change the drop down. So credit notes will be created for overpayment amounts. The write-off field in various windows and reports will not include these overpayment amounts. So we don't need that message again. So overpayments, we're going to do one write-off per customer. You could do one write-off per document. So if there's several invoices on your customer account and they have, maybe the invoices are for £5,002, you want to write off the £2 and they've done it several times, they only send you the 5,000. You can do it by document if you wish to keep a very clear track of it, but it defaults to customer. So again, let's go with a write-off limit of $1 and we'll preview to see do we have anyone here. I did it the wrong way around, did I? I did. So overpayments. Okay, so there was nobody in there. So that's how you do bulk write-offs. So it will create a batch that will have an audit trail code, don't forget. One thing I will say, if you are going to be doing automatic write-offs, you do need to make sure that you have a write-off account nominated in the system. Now, GL codes are set up, you can set them up on your debtor or creditor, or if you want, you can set them at system level. So let's go to the administration tab. And on the setup window in posting, same place we found our audit trail codes, you will see posting accounts. And these posting accounts, these are the default accounts if the system can't find one on a debtor. So say you didn't have the sales account on your debtor or your item, it will come in here. And if there's nothing there, then you're going to get an error. So within here, you can go into sales and let's have a look. So if I scroll down, you'll see my write-offs and my overpayment write-offs. We have two separate GL codes for there. Most places they're going to be the same. So write-offs is underpayment write-offs, overpayment write-offs is overpayment write-offs. So you have to make sure there is an account in there for that because otherwise the batch is not going to post. Which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Just a quick thing on batches not posting, and again, this is something that I've seen in recent years, is people don't print edit lists. Now you don't have to physically print an edit list, you can print it to the screen. People don't always know what these are. So if I go and have a look at a batch here, pick any batch, there's nothing in that one. So here's something in. If you hit the print button and send an edit list to screen, it will give you information about what's in the batch. So ignore that one. Any second now. Oh, it's using templates. Okay, so it's not as readable, to be honest, in the template, but yeah, so it gives me information. What I don't see in there, I don't see any error messages. If the kind of error messages you might see on this would be that you're posting to a closed period, maybe the VAT is wrong, maybe there's a distribution missing, and so on. If that's the case, you have a chance to fix it before actually posting the batch. And because if you don't, it will go into batch recovery, which you may or may not be familiar with. So that's just a quick thing on edit lists. You'll often log a call with support just to say you've got a stuck batch, and the first question usually is, did you print the edit list? So we can see, was there any problem with it? So that's the bulk write-offs. The next thing, and really the last thing I'm going to look at now, is deferring income and expenditure. So there is a module. It comes with your GP setup. It's been around for a long time, called Revenue Expense Deferrals. And what these are typically used for will be contracts. Again, a good example would be you get a support contract, a bill for support contract from m-hance. And let's say you get it in January. You don't want to put the full amount into January because it's covering the year. So you want to defer it over 12 months. So how do you do that? A lot of places are doing it manually. So they will post to a balance sheet account, post the full amount to a balance sheet account, and then take out 1/12 each month and put it into the revenue recognition, or sorry, the expense recognition account, the P&L account. So rather than doing any of that manually, you can actually do it using the revenue expense deferrals module in General Ledger. So the first thing you have to do is you have to set up deferrals. And again, I'm going to fly through this really quickly because it's not a training course, but if you want more information, do let us know. So this just says, gives me the setup for it. Automatically post through the GL, yes. Post into future close periods or previous close periods, yes. You may choose not to post into previous periods, but I'm going to leave it at the defaults here. The actual setup then, you set up a profile for your deferral. So you give the profile a name. So I guess let's call it support. And you say, what module is this going to be used in? So it's going to be used in payables. You can select multiple by holding down the control key. So I could say purchase order processing as well, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just leave purchase payables management. What distribution type do I want this to kick in on? So I want it to kick in on my purchase type. Okay. And then the calculation method, I can do it for the number of days in the period, equal per period, or miscellaneous. Miscellaneous you would key in as you go. So typically you're going to use equal per period. And what's the start date for this? Now, it could be a thing that you get your bill in March, but you want to recognize it for January, February, March, and so on. So you want it for prior periods as well. And instead of posting into prior periods, what you can do is you can start it in March and you can take 3 months in March if you wish, but you can edit it at the time that you're doing the revenue expense deferral. So I'm actually going to leave that blank and I'm going to say 12 periods. So the recognition account and the deferral account. So the deferral account is the balance sheet account. So that's the account that you're going to select on your transaction. So if I have a look at my balance sheet account, I think there's one in there for it already. So that's my deferrals account in the balance sheet. So this is my P&L account that it takes the 1/12 out each month from the balance sheet account and puts it into the P&L account. So let's just call it, I don't know, there's an account in there called rent, which isn't strictly correct, but let's just call it that. So next thing then is user access. What users have access for this? And I'm going to allow the SA user, and I'm going to just allow it to overwrite everything, just so I can show you what we're doing. So that's setting up a profile. So I can now go and enter a transaction in the purchase ledger. And let's put this in here. And I'm going to put in an invoice. I'm going to put it in January. You'll see we're working in 2027 here. So that's because we're in a test company. So let's say Ace Travel and 1, 2, 3. And let's make it, actually, I'm going to get rid of the tax. I'm going to make it exempt, just keep it simple. and put a nice round amount of 1,200 in there. And okay, so on my distributions, so I want my purchase account to be that balance sheet account we set up. Now I can go to additional and pick my deferral profile. So it's not the account that I want to use. So I'm going to use the profiles deferral account. And it has calculated $100 in this case to go to each of the 12 periods. And I am happy with that. So click the allocate button. So now when I post it, let's just have a look at what comes up. So here's my posting journal. Sorry, ignore those AA ones. Here's the transaction posting journal. So that's straightforward. You've seen those before. And here's the deferrals account it's gone to. And here's the actual deferrals. So what it's done is the initial transaction put 1,200 into the deferrals account, but then it went off and it did the distribution for us. So it said, okay, every month, so you see on the first of the first, the first of the second, the first of the third, and so on, it is taking $100 and putting it into the actual expense account in the P&L. And that's how deferrals work. So again, if you want any information on deferrals, do please ask a question and we will get back to you. I've covered pretty much all we wanted, which means I've spoken very quickly. I hope you got everything there. There are other little bits and pieces in GP that maybe you're not using, and perhaps we'll do another webinar. I don't know, we'll speak to the girls in marketing and see what they say. But for now, I think that's me for the day. So I hope to speak to some of you soon. And like I said, please do ask questions and we will get back to you on them. So,
thanks, Sharon, for that really informative session. For those of you who have submitted a question, we will respond to you directly offline. Today's session, I just want to highlight a webinar that we have in a couple of weeks' time, which is on our Power BI reporting. So this is specifically on our reporting pack for GP.
Sorry, guys.
That's okay. So there's the details. You can register via our website. So please keep a lookout in your inboxes over the next day or two, where we will send you a link to today's recording. Once the webinar has closed, a short survey will pop up. We'd really appreciate it if you could take a few moments to complete this. Once again, thank you for joining us, and thank you to Sharon. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.